welcome back to Vizaural Music, the music podcast where we often talk about music that we find on Bandcamp, on SoundCloud, and that was sent in by submissioners. You can always contact us at visceralmusic@gmail.com. Check out our website where you're going to find our YouTube videos, the songs that we talk about, visceral.music.blog, and you can always find us on Twitter and, like I said before, on YouTube. My name is Ryan, and with us today is Craig.
Yes, sir.
And returning again by popular appeal from our massive audience is Angel.
Hey, that's me.
Hey, that is you. And this episode...
Just wait. I'm going to pull back the curtain for a second.
Hey, don't pull back that curtain.
I already did. We recorded that last episode like 5 minutes ago. Which fans are clamoring to have Hungy back?
Thousands.
The two of you.
Yes, actually, that's about 25% of our listening base.
No, fair enough. All right.
So
you can
there
stay.
You go. Yes, and this episode is going to be a little bit different where, like I mentioned before, we normally talk about some really deep cuts that we find on Bandcamp and that were sent in. Today we're going to do something a little different in that we're going to talk about a music documentary because I love music documentaries. I actually really hate music biopics, but that's for another episode. And today I forced Angel and I forced Craig to watch a 2004 movie, a 2004 documentary called Some Kind of Monster. And if you've never seen this, it's on Netflix, so you should go watch it either after you listen to this or before. And this was a documentary about Metallica. And
yeah, if you have 3 days to kill, because that's about how long it took me to get through this 2.5 hour documentary.
It is very long, but I hope for this episode, and here's the structure. You might not be a Metallica fan yourself. I think that this will still be fun for you to listen to or something that you can stay engaged with because none of us here are that interested in Metallica. So we're going to be bringing some maybe different perspectives to this band.
And if you do like Metallica, you will probably hate this.
You know what? I don't think so, because I think this era of Metallica is not well loved, and we're going to get into that, and that's why this movie is actually so funny in retrospect.
I'm not enjoying being in the room with you playing.
I don't understand who you are, okay? I realize now that I barely knew you before.
It's been a beast, and it's sucked a lot of me into it. Some Kind of Monster. It is the best mirror we've ever had in our lives.
It was honesty and truth.
It was undeniable.
It's just so weird because you guys were just supposed to film us making an album. And all of a sudden we just set our instruments down and started talking, and next thing you know, we have a movie about a really dark time in Metallica.
I was straight up with you.
I think it's stock. Which part of that is unclear to you?
What have you been doing? Picking at me all night.
Save up the tension. Tension produces results.
If I hadn't had music in my life, it's quite possible I could be in here or be dead. I'd much rather be alive.
What is it you feel that you're not saying now?
If you're not happy playing music with me,
if you walked away from Metallica, I'm not sure that it would surprise me. I'm prepared for the worst.
I like that.
yeah.
Yeah. So here's going to be the structure for us. Because I imagine some people who are listening to this, you don't know much about Metallica. You might know that they're a heavy metal band. They're very popular. I'm going to be going through some background, some history. And Angel and Craig, they're going to be jumping in here. We're also going to just talk about how did Metallica fit into our adolescence or even our current era of music, because I guarantee if you were a 90s kid, like all three of us, even if you were not a Metallica fan, you were quite aware of Metallica. Like, they were omnipresent, at least where I'm from. So we'll talk about that. And then we're going to get into the documentary itself and some of the great things that come out of 2004, the Bay Area, and this era of Metallica. Are you guys ready?
No.
Sure.
Okay, and I should mention that a lot of my notes I'm taking from Wikipedia liberally. I think just the kind of core information about the band, it's all you need to know. So let's get into it. So Metallica, It's an American heavy metal band, and they were founded in 1981 in Los Angeles, California, by drummer Lars Ulrich and vocalist guitarist James Hetfield. Now, are both of you guys, do you love these two individuals? Because they clearly are the most fun people in Metallica.
Yes, I am a fan of what Lars did to destroy Napster. That did not backfire at all. Music downloading no longer exists. Well, actually, I guess technically he probably did pave the way for iTunes and like that Spotify model and shit like that.
Sure.
I mean, kudos, Lars. You.
And we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but Lars, this movie does fit into, so going back in time here, if you weren't around in the 90s when Napster came out, which was pretty much the first popular music downloading program, Lars Ulrich, the drummer from Metallica, was very vocal about this is like the worst thing ever. And in fact, he made some comments about like they're taking food out of my children's mouth every time you download a song.
Yes, while he's selling his beautiful artwork for hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. He's like, Napster is making my life impossible to live.
Yes, and so at the time, I definitely hated him for that because I was downloading lots of music on Napster. But as I got older, and I think he's still the worst messenger for that, what they really should have said is, look, what this is doing is just making it so that people feel like music should just be free. And that's going to have a negative impact on the entire industry. Not that like me in Metallica, I'm no longer going to be able to feed my children. Just that like...
I think his message was just all wrong, like you're saying. Like,
yeah, it was
kind of hard to hear that from a multimillionaire.
Right. It was a very selfish message. I do not remember him being like, yeah, this is hurting younger bands, up and coming bands. Like it's a struggle for them to make ends meet if their hard work isn't getting properly compensated. It was all about there's 750,000 users that download our music. Here's a list of every single one of them. And then I wish he would have just started reading all their names because, boy, there would have been some bad ones.
Yes.
And then I would have just been, and I would have been interested to see, like, am I on the list? Because I probably was.
Why do all of these names have 69 in it? I just don't understand.
This one's 42069.
Let's go back to the band. We'll get into Lars and his amazing presence in this movie. But so those are the two founding members. The group is really famous for its fast tempos, and early on in its career, its instrumentals, really aggressive musicianship that made them one of the founding big four bands of thrash metal. That was a name that came a bit later. They used to actually, Metallica initially called their band, or they titled it power metal. Those four bands are Metallica, Megadeth, and we'll talk about Megadeth a bit later because there's a little crossover in this film, Anthrax, and Slayer. And I would argue Slayer of those four is the best band. So,
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, Metallica earned a growing fan base in the underground music community.
Who's the worst?
Anthrax.
Anthrax.
I mean, Megadeth is the worst in like, you're the worst human beings on earth. I mean, they're worse than Metallica.
They're so cheesy.
Yeah, Dave Mustaine is a real piece of shit, right?
Oh, he is one. I mean, we talk a lot about like Alex Jones. He's been on Alex Jones' show on InfoWars.
Has he really?
Yeah, he definitely has. And he has.
Well, so is Billy Corgan.
Yeah, but I let Billy Corgan get a pass because he's Billy Corgan, and he's just so bizarre.
And Billy Corgan also is an owner of a wrestling federation now. So.
I was going to say, there's a wrestling thing too.
Anyway.
But pretty much everybody that owns wrestling companies are pieces of shit. So, because Sinclair Broadcasting owns one, maybe it's not a good thing to be that, the McMahons are awful.
Absolutely. They're all
This
terrible.
is now what, we're just going to go into wrestling more. So anyway, in
1984,
there was...
Well, and Metallica, of these four, the big four thrash metal bands, is without a doubt the one that has sold the most records. So like I said, they earned a really just growing and glowing fan base. They won community and critical acclaim for their first 5 albums. If you talk to any Metallica fan right now and you ask them what's your favorite record, it's going to be one of those first 4. It's going to be Kill 'Em All. It's going to be Master of Puppets. Those are some great records, in my opinion. The band's third album, Master of Puppets, in 1986, was described as one of the heaviest and most influential thrash metal albums. And its eponymous Metallica 1991 record was one that really kind of brought them to a mainstream audience. That record, that 1991 Metallica record, I personally think it's one of their best records because it took a little bit of the metal out, had more of just like, here's some hard rock sounds kind of thing, but it's also controversial with hardcore metal fans. The success of that record, which sold 16 million copies in the United States. Now, I want you just to think about that this metal band sold 16 million copies of a record. It just shows like how different the music scene has become now, or the industry has changed. It's kind of like when I think about ELP, or Emerson, Lake and Palmer, selling millions of records. I'm like, how could this ever have been so popular that my mom bought a copy? It just blows my mind. But Metallica, they were there.
For ELP, it was the drugs. People were doing a lot of drugs.
I don't think my mom was doing that
they
many.
They were all very appreciative of their classical stylings.
I'm going to go with the drugs.
They really wanted to hear, 5 different time changes in this 20-minute opus. That's what the American public wanted.
And who isn't a fan of the Russian composer Mussorgsky?
Of course.
Pictures at an exhibition.
The people that are not fans have never done drugs.
Okay. But Metallica was not just popular. The band has won 9 Grammy Awards, has been nominated 23 times, and its last 6 studio albums, beginning with that Metallic one, they have consequently debuted at number 1 at the Billboard Top 200. So Metallica ranks as one of the most commercially successful bands of all time, right up there with the Beatles, with the Beach Boys. They've sold over 125 million albums worldwide as of 2018. They've been listed as one of the greatest artists of all time by such influential magazines as Rolling Stone, which ranked them at number 61 on its 100 greatest artists of all time. Agree or disagree?
An important list for sure. Let's all agree on that.
I mean,
I'm
it
just
definitely
happy
is
that they weren't in the top 50, so I'll say agree.
Okay, fair enough. As of 2017, Metallica is the 3rd best-selling music artist since the Nielsen Sound Scan began tracking sales in 1991, selling a total of 58 million albums in the United States.
I thought you said SoundSkin.
Good program. Yeah. So let's go back in time here. So yes, Metallica is an important band. Whether you like them or you hate them, or you like certain eras of Metallica or you hate certain other eras, they've definitely had a huge impact on the music industry and the music scene. Let's take a step back to where they began. They started in Los Angeles in late 1981 when a Danish-born drummer, Lars Ulrich, and I must say, I love Lars Ulrich's dads. He is like the greatest little gnome that comes from Denmark, and it's just... He's perfect in this film. He's like the best part.
Would he be the best part? Probably close.
No, I would actually say the Mustaine stuff is way better, but we'll get to that.
That is.
Oh my god, yeah. I liked Lars's dad because he kind of had like the Werner Herzog accent, so that made me feel good. But then he wasn't saying things as cryptically weird as Werner Herzog, so that
Right.
True.
Yeah, kind of knocked him down a couple of pegs.
So Lars, he was born in Denmark, comes to the United States, and this is actually one of the reasons why this band that he will form, Metallica, becomes so successful. Let me just mention, this is what he puts in The Recycler, which was a Los Angeles newspaper when he was looking for a band. He wrote, drummer looking for other metal musicians to jam with, Tigers of Pang Tang, Diamond Head, and Iron Maiden. So the Iron Maiden one is important here because in the early 80s, obviously this is before the internet, you weren't going to easily find music being done outside of your local community. And at this time in Britain in the early or late 70s, early 80s, there's some what's called new wave British metal begins. And it's really, really awesome stuff. It becomes eventually very influential, but people in America hadn't heard this. But Lars has, because he had lived in Europe. And some of the most recognizable songs from Metallica on their early records are just straight up ripoffs of other tracks. So they did what I think a lot of artists did before the internet age. You went and you saw a band, you're like, oh, I'm just going to copy that in my local region, and no one's going to know the difference if I'm playing a Beatles song if they haven't heard it. So that's one of the reasons why Metallica got popular.
Interesting.
Yes. He ends up...
Interesting that he got mad at Napster then.
It's almost
Weird.
like,
He's a hypocritical piece of shit.
Yeah, kind of like that.
All right.
But he does connect with guitarist James Hetfield and Hugh Tanner of Leather Charm, which is like the dumbest name ever. They answer
Tanner or Leather Charm?
Well, let's go with both. Although he had not formed a band, Ulrich asked Metal Blade Records, which is still around today. I mean, they're a very influential metal record label. He asked them to if they could record a song for one of their upcoming compilation albums called Metal Massacre. And I remember those Metal Massacre it was just kind of like Punkorama, if you remember, in the CD era. That was just one of the ways you would learn about other bands. Metal Massacre from Metal Blade Records, these compilations were a way you'd get to pick up on some of these metal acts. And
C86 maybe?
What was that?
If it's kind of like a C86.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah. Is it interesting?
Look it up.
Okay. Well, they were accepted onto this compilation. It's actually quite classic that they misspelled Metallica's name on it, and Metallica, of course, was really pissed off about it. But now, if you can find that original original compilation with their misspelled name, it's probably worth a lot of money. Their first live success came early. They were chosen to open for British heavy metal band Saxon. Do you guys like Saxon?
Never heard of them.
Oh, really?
No idea.
Okay, well, they're kind of like a really bad version of Iron Maiden. So if you like Iron Maiden, well, you
do,
which I do, you'll at least listen to Saxon and be like, yeah, they're trying to do that. They're just not as good. But they were a popular band. They were like a great metal band in that they had covers of like Vikings on the thing. They're called Saxon, for crying out loud. So the covers are awesome. It was, and this was on their 1982 U.S. tour, so Metallica was joining them there. They recorded their first demo called Power Metal. Again, that's how they referred to their type of music in the early 1982. And from there they start to pick up just a lot of dedicated fans. They are playing at places like in Hollywood, Whiskey A Go Go. They have a really hardcore following, as you'll find in the metal community. People saying like, "Oh yes, I'm early Metallica fan. This is my thing." And from there, they're able to just slowly build enough of a fan base that they can record some records. I didn't mention before, but the other guitar player in the early days, I'm looking through my notes. I'm totally blanking on his name. Help me out here, guys. Dave Mustaine. In the early days of Metallica, there was Dave Mustaine, there was James Hetfield.
I thought there was another one. I'm like,
wait, say it again?
I thought there was a different guy than Dave Mustaine, because I'm like, we've already been talking about the guy that I think he's thinking about.
Yes.
I was on the same page.
I just have 5 pages of notes. So this is like the most notes I've ever done for one of our shows, which is, it's probably too much in the way of notes. But how about you guys? When you're thinking about Metallica, let's kind of jump to where we were at our lives when we first realized that Metallica was a thing. What role was Metallica playing in the music scene that you were in when you were in high school, middle school? Craig, tell us.
For me, it was probably the Black Album, and that was kind of like the ubiquitous album that everybody owned. You'd go to like parties or dances or whatnot. Well, I didn't.
Oh, a dance?
But if
you go to a dance and people are playing that,
some Metallica stuff, probably. Yeah, like why wouldn't they? There is some slow bangers on that.
Hold Your Girl Tight.
Yeah, Enter Sandman. It's a good song for a dance.
No,
it's not. So I think in most cases, I think it was everyone's entry point in my area would be the Black Album. And then some people would go further back and like discover the heavier stuff and then kind of get into that. I never really did, but it was just one of those. I think the Black Album in, what was it, like, for me it would have been the mid 90s, high school, middle school, that it was just everywhere. So many people playing it, like on the radio all the time. They had like a bajillion and a half videos. And then I think that was it, and that was like my idea. Like when I think of Metallica, I think of those songs, and pretty much only those songs.
And frankly, I would say most people do as well. When metal fans say like, "Oh, well, it's those first thrash records; those are the good ones," I guarantee most people couldn't tell you a single song off there. You mentioned Enter Sandman, yeah, that's from their later period, the period that I actually like a little bit more, which is more hard rock, less thrash metal.
Yeah.
So that's true as well. The fans want to make it sound like, oh, that was when they were quote unquote good, but actually when they were popular, it was already by the time they were doing more pop oriented stuff.
Yeah, then they did like the stuff with the orchestra and whatnot, and it's like, it's very
S&M.
You gotta actually, you should check out. There's a video footage of that as well, and it baffles me how terrible it is.
Great.
And I love that. I love when they try to use orchestras, but it's for pop music or this kind of stuff. It's just like, let's just add a few flourissements. Let's just have them do some of our chords really slow. So it's like really competent, classical musicians are just playing 3 or 4 notes over and over again to make it sound like this is.
They're playing like
music.
half notes and whole notes, and it's like.
And I should also say that Metallica, as well as Pearl Jam, are really responsible for a voice that we hear in so much metal music. That like that voice that you've heard. That voice that you've heard thousands of times in every freaking band that's followed. Like you can thank James Hetfield, and you can thank.
The thing that really blew my mind is during the documentary, whenever they were doing like singing his. Like he was singing and like they just kind of had like the isolated vocals from him. He's not a good singer. Well, like it just was weird. Like I don't know. Like all this stuff like just didn't fit. I know like they're working on vocals in a weird way, like lyrics like in the most mishmash way possible. But like all of his singing stuff is like, wow, dude sucks.
Mm-hmm. True that. Well, how about you, Anel? What? Because we grew up in the same era. We grew up in a small desert community called the Imperial Valley. It's in California, but along the Mexican border. It's not. When people talk about Southern California, they probably think of L.A. or San Diego, Orange County, that kind of stuff. And the Imperial Valley is very different from that. But what's your memory of Metallica and how it fit into the music of our childhood?
So, well, growing up, so there's a big kind of religious kind of feeling in this area, a lot of churches and stuff like that. So I was in a religious family, and my mom was kind of very particular about what I could listen to. So I didn't really get
DC Talk, yo.
Yeah, DC Talk.
And I was gonna say, and one of those albums was Metallica.
So I didn't. It took a while until I was like really listening to, I guess, secular music. I guess. So I kind of missed a lot of that early '90s stuff, unfortunately, except for like the big stuff like Nirvana and stuff like that. But Metallica never really made their way into my ears. I remember the earliest memory I have of Metallica is it was a shirt that Beavis or Butthead wore, and I was like, oh, that's a band I've heard people talk about, but I don't know what they sound like.
That's funny you mentioned that, because most of my understanding of metal from the '90s was also just the shirts. Like I saw Iron Maiden shirts. And I thought, whoa, that must be a really like scary band, like Cannibal Corpse.
No idea what they sounded like.
No, and only later I listened, like, oh, this is actually just like prog rock, just a little more metal-y. It's really silly and fun. Anyway.
So so I don't really. I mean, I kind of missed the whole like Black Album kind of era because that was very early '90s. What I really remember from Metallica is when they came out with Load and Reload. Just I remember some of those songs because they had videos, but I never got into it. I was never really into that, and I believe that's kind of like an era that a lot of people don't really care for.
No, it is not. Again, it is the stuff that sold well, and so when people think about Metallica, they think about that era of their music, or even a little bit before that. But it's not what if you're a Metallica fan going to their shows, you're probably wearing a Master of Puppets T-shirt or something like that, and thinking about that kind of era. But we had friends who were metalheads and who listened to that, and like you mentioned with the shirts, like I saw everyone with a Master of Puppets or a Kill 'Em All t-shirt at some point in my childhood. My brother was actually really into metal in high school when I wasn't. I was into the Britpop or electronic music, and he liked Slayer and he liked Metallica, and he played that a lot. In fact, he was the first one in our house to get a guitar, and I remember distinctly him trying to play Enter Sandman. Not well, of course, but you gotta start somewhere.
Is he still into that music?
No, definitely not. In fact, the odd thing is I became really interested in heavy metal, and he's like, "What? Why do you keep sending me this stuff?" Like, I don't. He listens to very soft, like indie folk kind of tracks. Craig mentioned a previous episode listening to like Damien Jurado. Yeah, that's my brother's jam. That's his kind of stuff. So I'm like, yeah, there's this really great metal band. They play like the song is an hour and a half, and it's got like this scary ghost on it. And he was like, I don't want to hear any of this shit. So get this out of here.
They play 3.5 trillion notes in that hour and a half. It's amazing. It's amazing.
And
just an hour and a half of.
That sounds like a prog documentary. We got to watch that one too.
Sounds like that Black MIDI music. Have you ever heard that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds crazy.
And the reason I wanted to do this show is because I randomly fell upon this documentary because I don't know why I decided I had 2 hours to waste.
2 hours and 20 minutes.
2 hours and 20 minutes.
It is very long.
It is way too long. And
way too long.
We're going to have to get to the movie in a second, but let me kind of just get us set up here before I talk about why we decided to do this episode and the movie itself. So Dave was saying...
What about your history with Metallica?
I mean, I think it's pretty much like you said as well. I wasn't interested in this kind of music, but it seemed like it was always around. It was like... it seemed like it was an important band, and that anyone who was talking about music when I was in high school, it was just understood that, well, Metallica is great and Metallica is awesome. They've done the greatest things ever. We used to hang out at a comic book shop that was also served as a food hub for people who are working in the fields. This is part of like the Imperial Valley culture. You might not understand if you come from anywhere else in the country, where you're like, part of the story is a comic book shop for the biggest dorks in the world, which was us. Yeah. And then throughout the day, they would bring buses of people who are going into work in the fields to come in and get food. So really awesome kind of cultural mix there. One of our friends, Anthony, his family owned it, and they all were big metalheads, but they were older than us. They were, 8 or 9 years older than we were. So they grew up in the 80s. So they were, Metallica, Iron Maiden, Megadeth. That's what they liked. And so I always felt like they were, the older kids in my life, or people that I looked up to as, they understand the world better. They understand what's good. And so I just kind of deferred to their musical taste. And I feel like that happened a lot with 90s kids like us.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I would have to say.
So true. Let's get back to the band's history a little bit. I mentioned Dave Mustaine, who goes on to form Megadeth, but he was initially in the band. And it should be very clear, if you just watch this documentary, that everyone in Metallica is a huge dick. They are terrible, terrible human beings.
Kirk Hammett seems cool.
Okay, and I will say that as well. He seems the most. Maybe it's just because he doesn't. There's not enough room in that band for another person to be overtly as big a dick as like.
No, that's true. If there was, well, that's probably why Dave Mustaine got kicked out of the band.
Yeah. You can't have 3 huge dicks. But
from the movies I've seen,
one is enough.
But I mean, Kirk Hammett, who is one of the other guitar players in the band, if we haven't mentioned already, he is known for also being a jerk, because what happens is later on, they're on tour, and let me read a little bit from this here. They're touring with Ozzy Osbourne. They're touring through Europe in 1986 on what's called the Damage Incorporated tour, which sounds so stupid and metal. They had to,
also sounds like a group of supervillains in the Marvel's comics in the 90s.
It does, which should also tell you, and this is what I didn't know about metal until I got older, that metal is for dorks. It is the dorkiest music genre in the world.
It's super nerdy.
And I feel that now people are onto it, but when in the 90s, it still seems scary because there was still like satanic panic stuff going on. You'd still hear about, there were bands that were overtly trying to be, there's Mayhem and all that Swedish or Norwegian death metal. There was Cannibal Corpse. So there was like scary metal stuff. And I'm sure that was part of the appeal for my brother. Like, I'm sure my parents were not that big on any of these bands, and just scaring your parents is always fun. But it's totally ridiculous and totally dumb. But while the band is on tour in Sweden, the bus driver lost control. They skidded, which caused the bus to overturn several times. Ulrich, Hammett, and Hetfield sustained no serious injuries. However, their bassist, Burton, was pinned down under the bus and later died. Hetfield said of the incident, "I saw the bus lying right on him. I saw his legs sticking out. I freaked. The bus driver, I recall, was trying to yank the blanket out from under him to use for other people. I just went, don't effing do that. I already wanted to kill the bus driver. I don't know if he was drunk or if he hit some ice. All I knew was he was driving and Cliff wasn't alive anymore." So this was a founding member of the band, obviously a friend of all these guys, that had grown up together and things like that. And they lost their bass player. They decided to continue on, and they actually had open auditions. Did you guys know that Les Claypool of Primus auditioned for Metallica at this time?
Did they just say that he was too good for them?
I don't think so.
What a different band that would have been.
It would have been. Can you imagine that? Yeah. Can you imagine how much more fun it would be to be around Les Claypool than all these jerks?
Yeah.
Anyway, they did also audition a man by the name of Jason Newsted, who was in these bands called Jet Sam and Float Sam and other terrible named bands, and he eventually does become their bassist. Unfortunately for Jason Newsted, the band never really accepts him. And in fact, the documentary, this Some Kind of Monster, starts off with him leaving the band. It's well documented, and he's even said it before. They basically, you can understand that this was already a committed group that was successful. There's probably going to be a little hazing involved. And they did do things like, according to the Wikipedia entry, it says they made him, or they tricked him into eating a ball of wasabi. But that's like the nice side of their hazing. They would also do things like pour beer on all his equipment when they got pissed off, or they'd hit him on stage when he was in the middle of playing a song if they didn't like what he was doing. So yeah, they were really just jerks to him. And in addition to just being jerks to the guy, which I imagine he was thinking, well, this is a successful band that's going to work out for me, they also cut him out of most of the royalties. So even though he was recording on their records, going on tour, they basically signed contracts that said any of these, this new member that's coming in, you're not going to get the money that we're getting, not even close. Oh, wow. So at some point, he decides, I think I'm done with this. I'm going to leave this band. I'm going to go form my own act. And that's really where Some Kind of Monster begins. And this sorry, go for it.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you know what album Jason Newsted came in? Like, what was his first album?
Gosh, let me look at my notes here. I don't. It would have been 1986. I'd have to, if one of you has Wikipedia open, you can find that. But yeah,
I really don't care.
Okay. And with...
I do, Craig.
Well, then look it up.
And the fans do.
Later.
They really trust our hardcore researching skills on the show. That's why 20, if not 30 people tune in every 2 weeks. The band moved up to El Cerrito, or they moved from El Cerrito, and they moved up to a place that I know very well, Marin County in San Rafael. And I always forget that Metallica was a Bay Area band. That's when they were really at their height. And that blows my mind because it doesn't fit with my mental image of a Bay Area aesthetic. Obviously, I'm living in the Bay Area in the late thousands, or what is it called? What is the decade we're in? What's the abbreviation for it?
I don't even know.
It's not the aughts. That's the decade before, right?
The pre-20s?
2010s.
The 2010s, sure. I mean, now it's so incredibly expensive and gentrified. I just can't imagine anyone be like, yeah, let's just move to the Bay Area to play our thrash metal band. I'm like, what? Why would you do that? What? But, they were here. And in fact, this documentary, you get to see a lot of Marin County. And Marin County, if you don't know, if you're listening to this and you're not from this area, it is the most unmetal place you could imagine. It is lots of people who made a lot of money in tech and people who are quite wealthy, and it's it's very beautiful. I enjoy traveling through it, but it is not, if you're going to be like, we're a hardcore band and we know the people and we're down with the working man, it is not that kind of place at all. So just keep that in mind when you're watching this documentary, which gets us to the documentary, which comes out in 2004. I've already mentioned that Newsted was leaving the band, and we see parts in the early portion of this documentary where they go and they visit his band, Ecoplex?
Echo Brain.
Echo Brain. God, what's with these terrible names?
Yeah, Ecoplex, isn't that a venue in the... Or is that a band?
I think it's a device.
It's a venue in...
San Francisco. Isn't it?
No, you're thinking of LA. That's called the Echo, and then there's a lower part that's, I think, called the Echoplex, but that might be wrong.
I think it's also one of the devices like Comets on Fire uses. I think they have something like that.
Oh, that's true. You're right.
So this film, again, it's being filmed in 2003, 2002, comes out in 2004, and it was a time of big change for Metallica. They just lost their other bass player who they'd treated terribly for many, many years, but it's then decided, I don't think I need to do this anymore. I'm going to go make my own bands. Oh, in fact, he actually didn't want to leave the band initially. He said, I just want to have some time to put my energy into these other side projects. And they said
they didn't want to let him have a side project, right?
Yeah. James Hetfield was like, no.
Which is bizarre.
Like you can't be in another band, and it's like, well, if they're not touring all the time, and he's like, I just need another creative outlet, and they're like, no.
I mean, a creative outlet, because he wasn't even allowed to contribute songs. He wasn't like he was a vital member of the writing process. So it's just like, we just need you to show up in studio, but no, you're not going to do this. So he said, F these guys, went off. What's I think great about the documentary, it kind of shows that he was doing pretty well with that band. Actually, that band did have some success, and I'm sure he was having a lot more fun being the front person of a band he created, not being terrorized by his other bandmates. So
I liked when they went to his show and he just took off immediately.
He left.
He just didn't want to talk to them.
I also love that they were like, oh, there's a lot of people here. They didn't realize that he might actually be able to be successful without us.
Well, because they were saying we thought we was going to be in a venue with 50 people, and he was he played at Bimbo's in San Francisco, which is a pretty big place.
Yeah, it is.
I thought that would be weird though, to be in this huge band, always playing these huge arenas and these huge shows. It must have been a weird change to play in such a small little venue.
Yeah, I imagine. I imagine it must have been fun to do that. It just I think I don't.
I was wondering if there's a little bit of pride though, maybe ooh, this is kind of weird. there's not a lot of people here. This is not this huge arena filled with dudes that know my songs. That must be kind of like a weird kind of shock.
It's probably weird to see like women in the crowd.
That is true. I mean, that's another thing about Metallica is there are, of course, female Metallica fans. They sold bajillions of records, but it is very much, this is metal. This is music for dudes who think really important stuff and are really tough guys. Like that's Metallica's selling point.
That's very true.
And
best of humanity.
We're getting ahead of ourselves because, as
sorry.
we mentioned in that documentary, that they're seeing their member leave, but at this time for Metallica, they're coming out of what we mentioned before, this hoopla that they created about commenting on Napster. The music industry was changing too, where they had Metallica's always been trying to adjust their sound to make money, and that's something Metallica fans might not always want to recognize, is that they've been very calculating with each of their records about what is currently happening in the music scene that we can kind of change our sound to meet. And at this time, this was when garage rock was getting really big. The White Stripes were about to become really successful in 2002, 2003 is that when they had their real breakthrough.
2003, I think, was the big breakthrough.
Yeah. But you could see just the music industry was paying a lot of attention to these kind of like back to the basics, 3-minute songs, and Metallica, they were trying to change with the times. So they're trying to figure out, what are we going to do that's going to allow Metallica to go into the 21st century? So this documentary, it's directed by Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky, and it shares the name with a song from their 2003 album, Saint Anger. And this film, it was supposed to be, this is hard to believe too, because it comes across so terribly for the band. I don't know if they recognize it, but this was supposed to be them showing that we are back to the basics, that we are still like the working man. We're still like we were in the 80s. Sure, our lives are a little different. We're older now, but the Metallica that you love, the people who we were when we were making those early records, we're still the same. That was kind of the point of this Some Kind of Monster. And it's so early 90s as well that the whole framing is that they're going to go together to therapy. That the band, because they have so many problems, they're such terrible human beings to each other, that they really need to have group therapy together to fix some of these problems.
Yeah, so they hire some Kevin Nealon looking motherfucker for $40,000 a month to have basically on retainer.
And in the documentary, they eventually realize, like, wait, this guy just seems like he's going to be around forever. Like, is this guy just now on the payroll?
It's like, when we go on tour, is he coming with?
And he seems kind of like bad, like kind of angry, like that they would consider not doing that.
It's like, oh, weird. Well, you guys are just going to fall apart then without me. I am Metallica.
It seemed like almost like he just kind of wanted to hang out with them forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just kind of like, just hang in their studio and be part of all the conversations.
Well, what was funny is the same thing with Bob Rock, who, great name. Just a beautiful name. But
of course he was going to become a producer with that name, right? That's his given name?
I don't know. Was it? Might be.
No, I'm
but like
stupid.
it was so funny because like both Bob Rock and Kevin Nealon, therapist DDS or whatever, like they just felt like with Bob Rock, he was playing bass with them, helping them produce the album a little bit, and like. When they got, I'm jumping ahead a little bit again, but when they got to like finding a new bass player, he was like, I don't think there'll ever be another like, permanent bass player in the band. And he's like, it felt like he was just being so protective of his position as studio musician for Metallica for this one album.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
I imagine, the therapist or psychologist, I don't even know what his specific job is. You just got to imagine this is just an amazing cash cow. And if it's being filmed as a documentary, you're probably thinking, I'm going to be like the Dr. Phil before there was a Dr. Phil. I don't know if he was around at that time, but you're thinking in your mind, like, this is my end to now go beyond just helping people with their psychological problems. But it's really, all of these kind of documentaries, they're not reality, in that this is not a pure look at what these people were like at the time. It's unscripted, of course, but they say some things in here which are just so stupid. Early on in the documentary, when they're trying to come up with their new record, the Saint Anger record that they're still developing at the time, and they're having some hard troubles in the studio, and they're making fun of each other, like, Lars, Hetfield is telling Lars, like, oh, your drumming sucks. Like, when someone drums for me, I just want them to, be able to drum. And so they're arguing at each other. And Kirk Hammett comes in and says, let's go beat this out instead of beating on each other.
That was so good.
And I thought, wow.
I liked my favorite.
Well, he was like a surfer now, so he'd gotten really that kind
Yeah.
of surfer mentality.
Yeah, because you can't surf when you're hungover. Well, at least I can't. I liked, my favorite thing was when I don't remember. I think it was before Hetfield left to go get sober for a year, and Lars was like, the guitar part's just stock, man. It's just stock, and he's like, what does that even mean? What the fuck does that mean? He's like, it's just stock.
Yeah, and
it's like you're drumming stock.
It was a weirdly passive aggressive way of saying that it sucked.
Yeah, it's like
and
it was just boring.
Just say
it's what everybody else was doing.
Yeah,
it was just so funny. I'm saying what it is. It's just stock, man.
And that's why it amazes me that they released this, because it's so clear to me when they're making this record that they actually don't have any new ideas to bring. They're kind of look, they understand this is a big money making endeavor, Metallica. It's like, well, we're not going to step away from that. But they have no real reason to make this record. They're all, you look at their homes, you live at their lifestyles, they all have kids, and you just think, no, you're not in this kind of world anymore. Why do you feel the need to make this?
Yeah, the best bit of musicianship was when Lars' son sat in on the drums. Just pounded away for 10 seconds. Just give me a record of that.
Yeah, that does sound good. And one of the when you mentioned the solos sounding stock, kind of the recurring theme through this is that it's Metallica coming to the realization that the world isn't asking for their big extended solos, which I think is the wrong thinking for this band, because they were definitely trying again to sound more like a garage rock band. People who listen to Saint Anger, if you go pull it up on Spotify right now, it's trying so hard to sound like, we're literally back in the garage, and it sounds like shit. It is a terrible sounding record.
Wait, see, this is what was confusing me. Didn't they put out an album called Garage Inc.?
They did.
Yeah, that was
before this?
That was like a B-sides covers kind of album, if I recall.
Okay, because I thought was that the one where everybody made fun of how shitty the drums sounded?
No, that is this record.
That's Saint
Anger, where they were recorded like absolute shit.
Yes.
Okay.
And I always want to give a band some praise if they're like, well, let's just do something different. Yeah, let's try it. I mean, I don't feel that we often praise acts on our show. We say, yeah, they're basically doing this style, and they're doing it well, or they're trying their best to recreate that. But with a band like Metallica, it just feels so shameless because they don't need to do that. And that's why Iron Maiden is still loved. Because
they've made the same record for 30 years now?
Yeah, but
if you put together all their albums, it literally makes cover art.
Yeah, but they did have some time in the 90s where the recording techniques changed a little bit, blah blah blah, but they never said, well, we're just going to always try to ape what that moment of music is. They're like, no, we're a band that makes 8-minute songs that we sing about, Icarus flying too high to the sky. That's just what we do, and that's why today they still are loved. And why Metallica, I mean, they're obviously loved by a lot of people, but they just have these eras of sad, crappy music.
Yeah, again, talking about the guitar solo stuff, because it's so funny because they're all so touchy about their thing in the band, and Kirk Hammett was like, if we don't have solos, it's going to really date it to this time.
And he's so right.
People don't do solos anymore, so why don't we just put solos in? It's so he was just so protective of his lead guitar position. He's like, but I need a 2-minute solo. How else will people know that it's me?
But you know what? He's right. It's I'm a guitar player. I do the solos in this band. If we're making a record where I don't do those, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah, but nobody said oh, well, live we can extend the songs, we can jam out, and then you can add solos, and it'll add a new experience to people when they come see us. He was just but if we don't put in solos, it'll sound like an early 2000s record.
And he's right.
Yeah, well, it's true.
He had
Turned out to
the
be
insight.
a genius. Yeah.
In fact, there's one point I just wrote down Rock Lobster because I think they slam like what they were doing or what he was recording, and they say that as like a negative thing, like, oh, what is this, like Rock Lobster? And I thought, damn, you should make Rock Lobster. I mean, you'd be lucky if you could make a song that good. Dumb
I missed that comment.
Yeah, I don't. I just wrote that down, so I'm not actually sure now what the
if it actually happened.
Yeah, I might have just been thinking I want to listen to Rock Lobster right now instead of this 2.5 hour documentary.
Oh man, and the way they did the lyrics when they decided to, like, obviously it was such a put on from from Kevin Nealon, where it was like talking about how like to be a better band and like to come together, like to have a say in everybody's parts, and like the way they wrote lyrics was like a Mad Lib style where they all would write stuff down
Yes.
and they talk about it and like,
Great
oh, I
art.
like that, let's put that there, and then they just like mashed everything together, and like obviously most lyrics are shit. Like if you just isolate the lyrics away from any song, they sound so stupid.
Sure.
But these sounded extra dumb.
Yes.
Like it was just so, but when they were saying them, they were so proud of themselves, and it was like, oh, then like the one where they're talking about like Frankenstein's whatever thing, like they'd go off on a riff or like a tangent where they'd like be making fun of like radio stations, and then like, yeah, they're just taking a piece from his forehead and a piece from this and blah blah blah, and they're like, oh, let's write that down, and like, oh god.
What was what was the lyric where they were like where they were the radio stations were gonna screw them over if they didn't like do this promo for them, and so they came up with the lyrics something like how was like, if I don't scratch your back, you scratch mine, or something stupid like, or you stab mine or something.
Yeah,
like, wow,
we scratch your back,
lyric.
you stab mine. It's
Yes,
like, that's so awesome.
Man, that's like the most 12-year-old emos thing I can imagine. But these are grown men.
There's some times where you can see on the dry erase board behind them like titles of either songs or maybe the
I didn't
album,
see
and
that.
some of them are so cheesy. They're great. I can't remember them, but they're pretty good.
And I mean, I hope I've recorded plenty of records with the Drunken Draculas where we're like, good enough, next, and we just move on. You know?
I believe it.
And I respect that Metallica, when they're going in, they're like, no, we are trying to make a statement. I'm really thinking about this, but it just shows how shallow, you know, their ability to kind of think beyond themselves and their stupid little world is. Like, you know, like you mentioned with the song lyric about the record station or the radio station, it just seems so childish. And like, they actually, if they're trying to make a documentary where they're like showing that they are like the working man and they understand the world, it comes across as totally vapid.
Yeah, like I don't know if you watched episode 2 of this, because there was like a follow-up on it where they talked about, you know, like,
I was really disappointed by that.
I will say there was only one kind of good thing that came out of it, where like I forget who it was, but kind of realized, or like came to the realization that type of the documentary that they put out, where they like realized, yeah, it doesn't make us look good, but it also shows that we're not like this pantheon band that everything's great. Like, we have struggles. We actually had to get a therapist to work through it, that it's okay to do that type of stuff. And like for the early 2000s to kind of show like mental health and like talking about your emotions without punching each other in the face, like I thought that actually was a really good thing. But like they definitely didn't realize that at the time they put it out, that's really the take-home message.
Right.
For them, it was like, we're back, baby. It's Metallica.
And, you know, I mean, in this documentary, at the very beginning, when they're having such difficulties in the studios, you know, James Hetfield runs off, and then they say that, you know, he goes into rehab for alcohol addiction. And I know, like, some Metallica fans are like, oh, yeah, well, that's when they started sucking, when they stopped drinking. Like, you know, he seemed like a really crazy person, that maybe it was good that he stopped drinking.
Yeah.
Like, they used to call this band Alcoholica, and they reference a little bit of, you know, their era when they were heavy partiers. They show like some montage footage, you know, of like, you know, the groupies and things like that. And
I like the concert footage where he's just
drinking.
cheersing, talking to the crowd about drinking, like throwing beer on people and all sorts of stuff like that. Like, yeah, that's great.
And I feel like they kind of gloss over some of that with a lot of these metal bands. I don't think in the Me Too era, if we look that closely at any of these acts, we're going to be able to accept any of their music, because I mean, the stories that are told about, you know, their groupies and stuff like that, I'm like, dude, these guys were like sexual predators.
Yeah.
Or so I've heard.
I mean,
No, don't hold me legally accountable for that.
But it'd
Now,
probably be
alleged.
a
Say
lot
we
of,
don't want to get sued by Lars.
Yes.
Alleged sexual predators.
I mean, I like the part at the beginning when they're talking to Mustaine, and I got really excited at that point in the documentary because I thought, oh, is this going to be like he's going to come back in the band? I actually didn't know much about Metallica's history at this time. I thought, did he actually rejoin, or they go on a tour? And Mustaine says in the documentary, "You are the reason people hate me." And I thought, no, that's not why, Mustaine. Like, people hate you because you're a terrible jerk and you have bizarre conspiracy theories and things like that. But I love how he thought the reason people hate me is because you guys kicked me out of Metallica.
Yeah, that made no sense to me whatsoever.
Like, you sold millions of records.
And they were still a
after
very
that.
popular band, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and they were like telling him, it's like, just, dude, Megadeth's pretty big. He's like, yeah, but I was in Metallica, and James never said he was sorry.
I love you.
Like, it was just so weird. Like a lot of the, like, there's just so much repressed emotion from, like, those three guys.
Yeah.
And, like, it's just so funny, like, that they're, like, hold on to something for that long, even, like, when they're massively successful, insanely, wildly beyond anybody's dreams successful with just millions of dollars. Like, with the bass players, like, oh, here's $1 million advance, sign with us. Cool? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what we can do around here.
Well, I think the interesting thing about, like, that Dave Mustaine in part is that you have this, like, thought of metal musicians like being these tough badasses that don't give a fuck about anyone.
Oh, they're the emos that ever emo.
Dave Mustaine seemed like he was like on the verge of tears.
Yeah,
the entire
he's
conversation.
Like, it was like, I just want an apology, and nobody will say they're sorry to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, I thought that's what I was going for, and then, like, Lars was like, whatever, dude, you're in Megadeth. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you a little bit about that interview, because there's actually some behind the scenes things that have to go on for them to get that in the documentary. So the producers of this had requested that Dave Mustaine give approval to include footage of this 2001 meeting. So, and there's some timeline problems here too, where actually that meeting happened before they had their breakdown in the studio with Saint Anger. But nonetheless, for narrative purposes, it comes at that point. And although Mustaine denied the request, he had earlier signed a release form giving the band and the producers the right to use the footage. So they still put it in, even though he's like, no, don't put that in, which I love so much.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is pretty cool.
Well, let's talk about Lars and his wizard dad, because this really is his movie. I mean, it focuses on Hetfield and his alcohol problems, and then coming back and writing brilliant
he was
lyrics.
gone for a huge chunk of it.
A year, I think, right?
Yeah. And I didn't realize how central Lars was to this band. Like, it really is his band.
Yeah, but when James left, did they still keep Kevin Nealon on retainer? Because like they were recording that for like every once in a while they'd put up a day and like day 620 and like. And then when they said the $40,000 a month thing, I'm like, okay, if he was with them for almost 2 years, 100 weeks, like, did they spend $400,000 on a therapist?
Oh, wow. That's a good question.
What do you guys think of Lars?
It would have been 20 months.
I'm sure they dipped
like
in.
Almost $1 million?
Hey,
for Kevin,
that's Metallica.
For him to be terrible.
Yeah, for him to say like, in the zone, there's no being angry. And it's like, they're a metal band, dude. They better be.
What did you guys think of
I just love when they changed zone to bone. And he got so mad at them. He was almost like, it looked like he was gonna quit. He's like, if you're not gonna take this seriously, and they're like, well, we're sorry, but it just made us feel really bad to see it gave us bad energy, and we didn't want to go in there because. And it's like, oh my god, well, at least the therapy's kind of working. They're talking about their feelings.
Yeah. I don't need them to talk about their feelings. I don't know why if they don't recognize that this is a business, like they should just treat it like a business. When I go into work, I don't have to like everyone. It's like, I'm here for 8 hours. I actually liked as well when he came back from rehab and he was like, no, I'm going to be in the studio for these hours and then I go home. I'm not going to like this hang around here at night. Like, this is now my job. Yeah.
He's like, you got me from 1 to 4.
I appreciate that. It's like, look, this is a business. We're going to put out a product and that's it. And I mean, it's not good art and it was a terrible record, but at least they're looking at it more like, this is my job. We don't need to all be buddies. We don't need to be a family in therapy. It's like, just make the product already. What did you guys think of Lars and his the whole section of the documentary about him selling pieces of art?
He was so very weird. Yeah, he was very emotional and like sad to be selling that stuff. Like, I mean, on the one hand, you kind of get it because, like, you know, he had them hanging around his house. He probably spent years making each one, and like he was talking about how, you know, maybe I could have done 30 more strokes in that corner up there with the gold paint.
Oh,
and it
those
would have
were
been
not
better.
his paintings, though.
No,
Those
they
weren't?
They
No.
were purchase paintings, right?
Yeah, in fact, I don't have the
Wait,
artist
so
here, but it's a very popular artist.
hold up. Okay, so he bought those paintings and then he sold them.
Yeah, he went through like a period of where he wanted to collect art. Is
I
basically what
thought
happened.
those were his paintings.
He might be a painter, but those ones that they were selling, the one that you had mentioned, like, you know, about the brushstrokes,
Yeah.
he was just commenting on it, like a metaphor for like, why did that artist stop there, or, you know, anything like that. But no,
right.
those are
no,
really
I
famous
understand.
pieces.
Oh, for some reason I thought he painted those.
No.
Then why was he getting so upset about selling shit that he had bought?
Because
That's
he's a
what was so
rich
weird.
asshole.
Yeah, it's just yeah.
It's like, did he lose money on them? Because it sounded
No,
like they were
he
selling
made a
pretty
no,
good.
No, he
money.
made Remember, he was so happy when he was at Christie's because I mean they were going. Some of them went for like I think one said $5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now I hate him even more.
Exactly.
Like at first I thought, oh, that's kind of touching that he's like so like touched by his paintings that he didn't really want to let him go, but they were just things that he.
Yeah, it'd be like him
fuck
being,
Lars.
you know, sad about selling his very expensive, you know, X-Men number 63 on, you know, on eBay. It's like the
for
same
like
thing.
10 times what he paid for. He's like, oh, okay. My God, okay. That
Isn't
makes
that the
me
most
more
metal
upset.
thing ever, though? To sell your expensive paintings at Christie's?
Yep.
Yes.
Super metal.
Okay,
dude.
good.
King
I also
Diamond
hate.
does it every week.
I also hate, and this is what I really hate about Metallica at this era. They want to be Johnny Cash. They want to have the same story of, you know, like he was, you know, very influential in the music scene. He sold lots of records, but then he had this kind of crash and burn. He obviously was addicted to painkillers and things like that. And Johnny Cash, what prison is he playing?
Folsom.
Well, he played
Folsom.
in a couple.
He played in San Quentin as well. But
but the famous one is Folsom.
Yeah, that's right. And if so, of course, in the Bay Area, we have San Quentin Prison. And what does Metallica do in this documentary? They go play San Quentin. And I cannot imagine a worse type of music to play to violent prisoners.
I thought the same thing too.
Yeah.
Why? I understand Johnny Cash because it's kind of soulful and, you know, and there's even songs about religious redemption and he's like talking their stories. But it's not music that's going to get you riled up. And I don't know if you also notice all the people that were there to watch it, all white dudes.
Look like white supremacists.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah, I was looking at their tattoos pretty close to see if I could see anything. I'm like, how well did they vet this? The shots of the prisoners.
So I imagine, because there are obviously people of color in that prison, none of them wanted to go see Metallica, or it was just like, oh, it's only white skinheads. I'm not going to that one.
Yeah, forget it.
Yeah, it's probably more of that. I think like there might have been a couple of like Hispanic people like in the quote unquote balcony, like
the mezzanine.
Like on the third level of like right outside their cell or something like that. Like not in the main area.
I mean, can anyone just go play San Quentin?
If you have enough money, yeah.
Oh,
let's do it.
Do they just pay money? And that must be it, right? They just said like we're going to donate $1 million of the prison system, and
pretty much.
And they're like, if you die, you die.
So
that was
so
bizarre.
So I've actually worked at 2 prisons, and it kind of annoys me to see something like this, where like, oh, they get to see Metallica play a concert, because it's like, wait a minute, these people are kind of trash. Why are we going to give them a little treat?
Oh, is it a treat to listen to those
Saint Anger
Metallica
Live?
songs?
Well, I mean, probably
This was
not,
actually
but I
oral
mean, they
work,
seem to
though.
be into it.
I know what you're
Yeah.
saying.
And
So,
more
yeah,
But
importantly,
still, prisoners are people, man.
Yeah,
They
I'm
got
fine with
caught up
prisoners
in
getting
the
music.
military prison,
Nah,
complex
nah.
for profit businesses, man.
I'm less
No,
inclined to
they're
give
shit.
Metallica the platform to be like, look how hardcore we're at San Quentin.
Yeah.
Look,
That
I
was
used to work. I used to work for the state. I've seen a lot of things. I know what a lot of people have done. Those people shouldn't get a treat.
Fair enough. Especially white supremacists, I'm not too down
Exactly.
with them getting all celebrated and watching Metallica. So that was very
Right,
bizarre.
but
and
if
also
it was
just
all
felt
for
out of time.
low level drug crimes and like possession of pot,
Sure.
that, those people. We didn't see those people in the video because those are all minorities that get arrested for that shit and put into prison.
And they're not San Quentin either.
That's true. Well,
Yeah, maybe.
with the racist system, they probably are. They're like, here are white supremacist murders. Here's a black guy that got caught with half an ounce of weed.
pot, yeah.
These are the same to me.
So this documentary is meant to celebrate this new era of Metallica, that they are bringing a new sound. They're staying with what the kids want these days, and now they've cleaned up their act. They're able to talk to each other, that it's going to be a new Metallica. It really is just another low point on their long slide, because I don't know if you guys have even listened to some of the recent Metallica records. Did you guys listen to the Lou Reed? Lulu?
No. Lulu? God, no.
I actually love it in that it is a terrible, terrible record. I don't know how how Lou Reed and Metallica got together, why they thought this was a good idea, but I just appreciate that they made it. It's so bad, and yet I love that they tried to do that. But they've not made anything that has been remotely good in a long time. And this was, I think,
the cover for their most recent album.
I probably have, but I can't recall it.
It's god awful.
Well, this record did not, Saint Anger did not receive a lot of acclaim when it comes out. This documentary did, however. In fact, it won a number of awards, which blows my mind because I think it's so long and it's kind of meandering and somewhat pointless in the end.
It meanders quite a bit. I will say, like, the bass player stuff was fun.
Yes,
like,
that's what I want to see. I want to see actually Mustaine, like, I want to see his life being a crybaby about not being Metallica.
Just being sad every day.
Like, that would be a much better film.
The third most popular power metal band.
I'm going to go on Alex Jones and I'm going to sell some supplements.
Did anyone else find it very awkward, speaking of the bass player, find it very awkward that so if you may or may not know this, but obviously he didn't play on the album like at all, like not even a little bit. And then he joined the band and then was at this Icon presentation.
Yes.
Well, it sounded like that was kind of the impetus for them to get a new bass player, because like they're like, oh, this would be a great time for you to introduce your new bass player to the world at this event.
But I mean, if I was that guy, I would feel very stupid being at something where they're honoring this
being
band,
and
I'm like, I haven't done anything.
The first time he's played with them, it's like, all right, you're an iconic member of this band now.
Yeah. And that moment actually feels a lot like many of these music biopics. Did you guys see Bohemian Rhapsody?
God,
no, and I never
Okay,
will.
well, I mean, like every music biopic, it's always like they start the film with they're about to like go on stage for an important show, and then they just rewind. They show you like, how did we get here?
Isn't that what Walk the Line did? Speaking of John Cash,
every one of those biopics does the exact same thing. And Bohemian Rhapsody, they do. They're about to play
Walk Hard.
They're about to.
I think it does.
They were about. Queen is about to play Live Aid, and I'm thinking, it wasn't that important. Them playing at the event wasn't that important either, but they make it sound like we have to reunite to play Live Aid to save the world. And they make it look like they raised all that money themselves. And so that moment in the documentary feels the same thing. Like, what the hell is this Icon thing? Was it like VH1 Icon or something? Something really pathetic and worthless?
I don't even remember that. If they even did more of those. I don't remember that program at all.
No, I don't remember it.
So just like something that's totally inconsequential in the real, I mean, even in their own history, I'm sure they're like, who cares? Like, we were on a TV show.
They probably don't even remember it.
Well, the record itself was not well received, and it has not gained like positive attention in recent years.
But it debuted at #1.
It sure did. This is what Pitchfork. Now, mind you, this is 2003 Pitchfork, and Pitchfork,
the best era.
The best
that
era.
Really is.
And Pitchfork is not the kind of place that's generally going to give Metallica a good rating, at least not in 2000.
Like, they 100% reviewed it just so they could have their snarky ass.
I mean, this is a website that when Jet's record came out, their entire review was a monkey pissing in its own mouth. Just a little gif of that. But this is what they wrote about Saint Anger. They said, behind me, shimmering cylinders of stacked Saint Anger discs stood in tight rows, an electrical current carousing through them for defense. I snapped the book shut. He's, talking about being, at this place getting this record. I snapped the book shut, sickened by the absurdity. If only Marx had lived to see this, the sides flip over a dwindling battle line. For the first time, a technological advance, MP3s and digital downloading, spelled victory for the proletariat. File sharing had become an anti-establishment as Marx had envisioned metal sounding, and Metallica, Marx's metal champion, had dropped an iron firewall between their music and their fans, who, despite their revolutionary ripping, were, for the most part, bourgeois boys choosing bands based on how the logos looked, protractor scratch from study hall desks. We kibbutz workers, we lived here by choice, manufacturing Metallica CDs, faced time in the lightless cell if found touching or experiencing St. Anger before its shipping date. Yet James Hetfield seemed as always sing about being locked inside a lightless cell as a badge of honor. Irony upon irony upon irony. Then again, Marx and Engels did grow their beards back and move on to more ambitious projects. They finished the review with, Metallica had become less a band leading a genre than a team soaking up payroll in the second-tier sport. This was NASCAR, WWE. Logos, sneers, mustaches, and beards. Hair grows back, but the Jerry curl of insincerity, of contradiction, and of compromising a cause never straightens. That's pretty beautiful.
That review was about as bad as Saint Anger.
It's just
yes,
that
Marx,
is so Pitchfork.
Marx definitely was talking about metal. Oh God, that's what I hated about Pitchfork.
So great.
Yeah.
I miss them
But-
so much.
But that is funny. I mean,
You can still read the reviews, Sungi. They're doing new stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
they're not like that anymore.
yeah, they're definitely not like that anymore. They've cleaned up that journalism, or at least that prose. But I think that last bit, that, the insincerity comes through with this, and it comes through with every move Metallica makes. That it just feels like we're just making a new product that's trying to ape the current era. And so I find that truly captures this record and this documentary.
Yeah, I know when I started watching it and I was like texting you idiots like my live reactions, and I'm like, oh my God, this is 2 hours and 20 minutes, and then I fell asleep about halfway through and I started watching it the next day, and I'm like, all right, I got to stop after 20. Like, I do think in hindsight it is a good look at the band if you aren't a fan of Metallica. Like, I don't know how, if I was a big fan of Metallica, how this would come across.
That's a good point.
But I still think it is an interesting, like, work of film, just because, like I said, it does kind of legitimize the use of mental health support in getting you through things.
I love that. That's our takeaway. It's like, well, that's a good thing that people better understand.
It really is. I mean, it does break down some of the walls of toxic masculinity. Like, obviously, they're still very much up with these guys. Like, some of the arguments that they would get in, and then towards the end of the argument, then they would start using like the therapist language, and like it was kind of cool to see them like kind of get it. But I guess if you're paying somebody $1 million to hang out with you for 2 years, some of that stuff is going to rub off. Mm-hmm. Like, I would bet money that Metallica wouldn't exist if they didn't hire that guy.
I think they would still exist as long as there's money to be made. I don't think they're ever going to stop until they don't make money.
Because like, again, the follow-up video or whatever, like, you could tell the band, like, was it like in good spirits with each other type of deal. Like, they just seemed happier. Obviously that was probably close to the low points in their career as a band and stuff. Well, okay, second lowest point. I guess losing a founding member to an accident and dying is probably the lowest. So let's say this was the second lowest point of the band. But like, I honestly, I don't think they would have existed if they didn't actually go through that awareness, the self-awareness that they had, like mental issues, like, those type of emotional problems.
Sure. On Hell, Entertainment Weekly, they give this documentary an A, and they wrote that it is one of the most revelatory rock portraits ever made. Do you agree or disagree?
Disagree.
What is a good rock documentary that actually people should watch, maybe instead of this 2.5 hour slog?
I still love Hype.
Hype is great.
I'm trying to think of a documentary that I think is actually very good.
I mean, I think Dig is actually the best.
You know what? You're right.
Modern one.
I forgot about that one. That's a great one.
That one also, we'll have to talk about that another day, but that one also captures just like the time when they're at the very beginning, when they're celebrating this band is like, wow, how brilliant and genius. And when you really look at the band, you're like, nah, not so much. Like, calm down, people.
What was that one that came out recently? Death, a Band? What was it called?
Oh yeah, Death. A band called Death.
A band called Death. Yes,
that one is great.
That was
too.
good.
That's a good one.
And that one's great because it, just they found that those records or those songs that no one had listened to, but it talks about kind of race and rock, and it's got more interesting elements perhaps than Metallica being rich and selling millions of dollars for their paintings.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any final thoughts on the great Metallica documentary, Some Kind of Monster?
I have a side note.
Ooh,
Side
notes.
So the directors of this documentary that you mentioned earlier actually have a very good documentary, actually 3 documentaries called Paradise Lost. That was about the West Memphis Trio.
Huh.
About these, I believe it was 3 teens in the early 90s that were falsely accused of killing some children. And a lot of it had, arguably, of course, and it had a lot to do with their love of metal music was a big part of the prosecution's arguments.
Yep, it was satanic panic stuff of, these kids had been turned into Satanists listening to this metal music, and then they argued killed these children.
Yeah.
And they're still in prison currently.
No, they came out.
Did they? Recently?
Yeah. I want to say in 2011. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
They were released, or at least one of them at least was released. Maybe not, if not all 3.
And I think actually Metallica saw that documentary, and that's why they wanted them to do this documentary.
I think actually what happened was there's a Metallica song opens the first part, if I recall.
Oh, okay.
So that was kind of like a big deal that they were able to use their music.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so check it out.
All right. And Craig, any last thoughts on this amazing documentary?
The documentary was stock.
A stockumentary?
Yes.
All right. Well, next week, folks, we'll come back and we'll talk some other rock-related films in the future. We'll get a normal music episode back with us in 2 weeks. So until next time, keep listening.
Peace.
Bye.